Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the ANN podcast.
Hello, sir. Thank you for having me.
So, I hear that you're working in Summit Airlines as a cabin crew manager.
Yes, I am. I've been working as a cabin crew manager for the past almost 2 years now, and I've been working as a cabin crew for the past almost 6 years now. I started my training at in 2017.
Mm-hmm. 2017.
Yes.
And so you've been working with Summit Airlines since 2017?
Yes, I was initially selected for the initial cabin crew training by Summit Air at 2017, and I officially started flying since early 2018, and I've been a cabin crew ever since.
Ah, wow, wonderful. So, what does it take for somebody to become a cabin crew? I mean, there is a certain course that you've got to do, or how does it really work?
Well, the first question you asked me, what does it take to become a cabin crew? It feels like I'm in my initial interview days again, because this is one of the most asked questions, interview questions that a potential cabin crew candidate gets. So, what it takes to become a cabin crew, of course, there are many, many different factors. First off, I believe to become a cabin crew, you have to have that confidence. You have to be patient. You have to be, of course, you have to be well polished, well groomed, and all those things. But I think confidence definitely comes first.
Well, there is a mushrooming a number of institutes that hold trainings for cabin crew in our country. Have you ever been to any of those and taken the certified courses, maybe?
Yes, I did. That's actually how I got into this industry. I was trained. I trained at EHTI. I don't know if you've heard of it, Air Hostess Training Institute in New Baneswar.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the prominent cabin crew training institutes in Kathmandu, Nepal. So I trained there for about 3.5 months. That's how long the course is. And soon after that, I applied for vacancies in airlines. Yeah.
Okay. And well, let's talk about the time prior to you joining the Air Hostess Training Institute and after you joined. So, in most of the academic courses that we have in our country, there's a great gulf between the skills that are really required in the job and the things that they really teach you. So, a person who might have studied 4 years of computer applications might not know how to design a simple computer app.
Yeah.
And so, when they go to the job, they feel rather ashamed. They hate their college as well for not giving them the proper amount of training in order to excel at a particular job. And this, I think, is a growing concern amongst a lot of people, in that what they learn and what they actually have to do are two very, very different things. So when you joined Summit, was there a reflection like that, in that you wish that a few things should have been taught more?
I mean, obviously, yes. There is like you said, there is a huge gap between like what we learn in the initial training and what we really have to face in the job. But I also think that this is because once you enter the field, you're comparing to yourself to experts, or at least you're comparing yourself to people who already have experience. And so maybe that's why you may feel a lack thereof. But I still believe that, initial trainings are just as important because it sets you up with a basic foundation. It sets you up with a basic knowledge, basic guidelines, which is important because once you enter the industry, you have to, have the basic knowledge as well, right? So with that knowledge, you're comparing yourself to like more experts. Let's say I'm a freshly joined cabin crew. I know what an aircraft is. I know where Kathmandu airport is. I know the phonetics used in aviation. I know basic aviation terminology. But I can't compete with a cabin crew who has like 3 years more experience than me, 5 years more experience than me. So maybe that's why there may be a certain gap. That's what I believe.
So when you first went to work as a cabin crew, were you not a bit daunted, maybe a bit scared?
Oh, I was terrified. I was terrified. I still am sometimes. But you just learn as you go.
Yeah, it is a part of
Yeah.
the job, and then it becomes a part of you.
Yeah, it does.
So which was the first place that you actually flew to, say, when you took off from Kathmandu?
To Lukla. I flew to Lukla.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah, it still is. I'm still fascinated whenever I go to Lukla. I mean, it is considered one of the most dangerous airports in the world, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel lucky to do those flights and still thrive.
So since you first went to Lukla, I assume that it was in the year 2017, 18?
It was in early 2018.
Early 2018. So how much or in what ways has the cabin crew industry changed in the last 4 or 5 years? Have there been any improvements?
I mean, I can't say much because I've only been working as a cabin crew for the past 5 or 6 years. I'm sure someone who has had more experience can give you a better answer. But in my experience, since becoming a cabin crew, um, I would definitely say that there are some SOP or what is known as standard operating procedures that have definitely changed. The Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal has definitely upped their game and safety standards as well.
Yeah, I think that our country is more or less good in comparison to some other countries where you hear a lot of issues related to the problems that are faced by cabin crew. For example, in the last week alone, we had this incident that a 62-year-old Scandinavian had molested someone, a cabin crew in India. There are also reports that there are people who pee very close to the doors of the of the toilets in the aircraft. Sometimes you hear incidents of somebody misbehaving with a cabin crew. We don't really hear instances of something like that in our country. So I think that the bad rapport that's generally thrown about the passengers in our country or the aviation sector in general might not always hold true.
Well, I think cases like this, they're very sensitive to talk about, but just as important. I mean, they have to be some light has to be shed upon these issues, and of course, that's not to say that just because you haven't heard of something doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. Maybe it has gone unnoticed or unreported, or even if it had been reported, maybe it didn't come to light. So that might be possible as well.
Yeah, that's always a possibility. But we did have a report that there were about 3 cabin crew that were suspended for taking photographs which were unwarranted, and that was in Nepal itself.
Yes, it was. I believe it was Nepal Airlines. Yeah.
So, what are the places inside the aircraft that maybe a cabin crew can take a photograph, and is there a chamber where you can't?
Well, on the job, we're not supposed to take pictures for safety reasons. Because once you're involved in taking pictures and videos during the flight, you never know when an emergency might occur. So we have to, as cabin crew, we are trained to be always, always, always prepared for emergencies. So let's say I'm taking a picture of the view outside from the aircraft, and there's a certain emergency that needs to be attended to immediately. So I might panic, I might have to, hurry, and in a hustle, I might, worsen things. So, yeah.
So we're not supposed to take photographs inside an aircraft.
So by we, I mean by cabin crew, not the passengers. Passengers are allowed to take photos and videos as they like. But if if you're just filming a cabin crew, that might come off as a bit rude as well, because we don't know the intention behind why a person may be filming us.
So you must have flown to very remote parts of our country as well. So
Yes.
falls in a remote-ish. I wouldn't say it's as remote as it used to be, say, a couple of decades ago, but is still a remote part. You said that you also flew to Dolpa, maybe?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I have flown to Dolpa, to Simikot, Homlat, Jumla, all the rural areas because the airlines I work for mainly operates in the stall field, which stands for short takeoff and landing. So we operate on stall airports, usually to airports that have no road access. Yeah.
So how is it? What is the general feel that you have when you fly to airports like these? I mean, these are very small spaces. The runway is not that great. If the pilot has an error of say 10 to 20%, you know that the plane might crash. If you go to the Lukla airport, there is a big wall that is there,
Yeah.
and the pilot has got to be spot on with its timings. If there's a delay or if there is not the perfect amount of pause before you get there, you know that you're going to hit a brick wall. And I think that it must be something that should scare anybody before they take off.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, in stall airports, there is a higher margin of risk involved there, but I'd have to say that cabin crew are trained accordingly. That's why we go through rigorous trainings. Of course, operating in stall airports are not like operating in international airports or bigger airports or trunk routes, but it is still a part of our job. So yeah, cabin crew are trained accordingly. We go through like rigorous trainings, yearly trainings, and we have all sorts of trainings to like prepare ourselves for that. So
So, what sort of training, what kind of things would be involved in those trainings?
so basically, we are involved in different kinds of trainings. For example, we have our annual SOP and SEP training, which stands for the Standard Operating Procedure and Safety Emergency Procedure training. So in SOP, SEP training, we go through things as simple as like how to go on with our normal day-to-day operations to like how to handle certain emergencies. For example, what to do when the cabin door opens during flight and how to prevent it before it happens, or what to do if it even takes place, things like that.
And has something like that ever taken place in a flight of yours?
Luckily, fortunately, by the grace of God, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. And I hope it never happens. Yeah.
But there might have been one or two particular instances where you really thought things might go very bad.
Luckily for me, I have not, but my colleagues have.
Well, there was a flight in a particular airlines, and I don't want to take names because then people might assume that I've been backed up by a different airline.
Amazing.
There was a flight about 2 or 3 years ago by a certain airlines company, and one of my uncles was there, and he cried his heart out that day. He thought that that would be the last day of his life. All of the passengers thought so. And when he landed, when he came to us, he wasn't able to speak because he had shouted so much that his vocal cords were not really in the position to talk normally. So I think that this is something that passengers time to time undergo.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the news about civil aviation or the general information about turbulence, about such unruly incidents are not given to people as much. So they're extremely fearful when those situations take place. But for people like you, who've obviously had the training, who've been told that there might be circumstances which might not be all that good, gives you a certain confidence to get through the events. And so a normal person who's not had any training, hasn't heard about clear air turbulence, for example, might be very fearful, right?
So was your uncle involved in a turbulence of some?
Yes, turbulence, a really bad turbulence.
Oh, okay. Well, his crying and shouting is perfectly reasonable. I can understand that. I mean, even as a cabin crew, I'm going to be honest, completely honest here. Turbulence does scare us. It does scare us, but it's not as intimidating as you think it is. Because turbulence, the science of it. It's just we're running into air pockets or things like that. But I think in the history of aviation, there hasn't been a major accident just because of turbulence. And cabin crew are trained to handle turbulence as well. It is an unusual situation for us as well. So cabin crew we are trained to remain calm. We have to make sure that everyone is okay. Everyone, by everyone, I mean the passengers. So we have to make sure the passengers are okay in their seats, fasten their seat belts. We make sure that they're following all the safety protocols. And the most important thing is we have to remain calm, because as soon as turbulence hits, all the passengers just turn to the cabin crew. And, if there is any slight hint of fear in our face, then that dictates the whole atmosphere of the flight as well. So, yeah. So I'll say that cabin crew we're trained for that as well.
Yeah, we were talking to Divar Raval, who's been working as cabin for 16 years. She once told of a flight when she really thought that would be her last day. But she told about this dilemma that a lot of cabin crew face, as you've enunciated, that the fear is not supposed to show in your face, because you guys are the ones that we look up to. And if we think that you guys are perfectly all right with this means that nothing dangerous is going to happen. She says that is still a challenge. The situation really becomes bad. She told me, and she said this in a private conversation, that she had already even penned a letter to her parents.
Oh my goodness.
In that particular flight, saying that I might not survive.
Oh yeah.
And luckily she did. Fortunately for us, for her, for everybody, she did. And sometimes she still goes back to the letter, reads it from time to time.
Oh, she's kept it.
Yes, so she's kept it with us. So.
Interesting.
And during the time of COVID, how difficult was it as a cabin crew? I mean, were there any laying off people or cutting down on jobs like we had in a lot of other industries? Was something like that particularly rife in Summit Airlines or the Nepalese aviation in general?
Well, I can't speak for all the airlines in Nepal, but I have had friends who were cabin crew in different airlines that were laid off during the pandemic. And I have to say COVID wasn't forgiving to anyone, not even the aviation industry. We did have limited flights or no flights at all. Some airlines had their whole fleet grounded because air travel was restricted. And for Summit Air, for the company I'm working for, we did conduct cargo flights, and sometimes we also did rescue flights as well. So rescue flight is when you fly. So rescue flight is when we transport a sick passenger from one place to another for medical assistance.
Okay, so I think that the rescue flight was particularly pronounced in the Lukla area itself.
It wasn't just limited to Lukla. We also did flights from Bhairava and Pokhara and places like that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask you about Lukla is because I was there during the time of
pandemic. Oh, you were?
Yes, I was living in Kumjung back then, and during the pandemic, I didn't really want to come to Kathmandu because it had only been about a month that I went there, and I found the weather so fascinating. I had all of the quietude in the world, and there was a library for me. So I could stay in the library, read for hours, get to write as well, and I thought I'm never leaving this place. But then there was a lot of news that a lot of trekkers who were there to base camp were told to get back as soon as possible because the COVID scare was there. And you know that there is a dearth of medical facilities in that region. So I thought maybe you were... And Summit Airlines was one of the key players in terms of flights that are operated to and from Lukla.
Yes, we were. And like I said, we did do rescue flights from Lukla as well, but it wasn't just limited to Lukla. Yeah, we did other sectors as well.
And what are the sort of safety procedures that a cabin crew had to undergo during the time of the COVID when you were doing rescue operations, given that there might have been patients who were there with who were infected with the COVID?
Yes, we did. We did fly patients having COVID as well, but we were also trained in that regard as well. So a medical professional from civil aviation came to us. I mean, not came to us, but we were trained by a medical professional on how to handle COVID patients as a cabin crew. So we were taught how to don and doff protective equipment, how to handle such patients, and to sanitize the aircraft, sanitize ourselves, and everything of that sort. Yeah. But just because like we were flying COVID patients didn't mean that we were alone. Of course, the patients did come with their guardians and a medical team.
Medical team, as there must have been a sort of a safety net that was placed as well in order to shield the passenger, something like that?
Yes, they were placed inside a vacuum.
Vacuum chamber.
Yeah.
The reason I asked this is because I was involved in, I took a helicopter which was there in order to rescue a COVID patient. And it was a matter of shame that the helicopter company was not informed that they would be receiving a patient. So the authorities, where the person was sick, did not tell the helicopter company that it was a COVID patient, because that would have meant that the helicopter company wouldn't really be able to transport goods at the same time, and that would increase the cost of taking the passenger.
Oh, yeah. I think this also has to do with the stigma around COVID at the time, because initially, when COVID was just starting, people were kind of maybe more like ashamed of having COVID. So, they would be shamed just for having COVID. They would say like, oh, यसलाई त COVID, मलाई त COVID लागेको छ, उहाँको छेउमा जानु हुँदैन भनेर. So maybe it's just because of that stigma too, like passengers were hesitant to inform, companies about having COVID.
Yeah, touching upon that stigma, I mean, it is definitely, it's not maybe, it is a certainty. I remember one of my brothers who was infected from COVID, and since we're from the Brahmin community, the priestly class as they call it, or certainly the caste that is thought to be ranked upon the higher echelons, he told me that after having COVID, I know what it feels like to be an untouchable in the society.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yes. So he was a lot more sympathetic to the people of the so-called lower caste in our community. So I definitely think that your comment about people not wanting to share that they had COVID, or not letting know that some of their relatives might have been infected with COVID, is a definite certainty.
Yeah. I mean, I see this because it's not just COVID, but we do fly like other sick passengers as well. We have pregnant passengers who do not admit, who do not, disclose the fact that they're pregnant, and which led to an incident of a junior cabin crew of mine. She had to deal with a birth on board. She was not informed that the passenger was pregnant. None of the ground staff were informed, as a matter of fact. And so during flight, she had to, deal with the mother giving on board. And luckily, the mother and baby, they were both healthy. She was able to handle the situation as best as she could, because we are, like I said, we're trained for all types of emergencies and situations. So birth on board is one of the trainings that we also go through. So she handled it quite exceptionally. But yeah, speaking of passengers not trying to disclose their medical conditions, I think it is an issue here in Nepal. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. So, if there is an aspiring cabin crew, for example, a person who wants to train as an air hostess, do you think that there is a lot of ground for them to be trained in? I mean, there are students who come up to me and ask me what it takes to become a cabin crew, what are the things that they have to in order to become a cabin crew. And we see that there are a lot of institutes now. Say back in the time that you trained about 6 or 7 years ago, there were only a handful of institutions maybe that provided cabin crew training. But now there are hundreds of these institutes, and you can find them in every nook and cranny, as they call it. But the fleet of our country, the number of aircraft in our country, has not seen a proportionate rise to the number of people who want to become a cabin crew. So, how difficult is it, according to you, to break through as a cabin crew now compared to, say, 6 or 7 years ago?
Well, I would have to say yes. The fleet size, the aircraft fleet size in Nepal is limited. Yeah, it is limited, but job opportunities are not, I believe, because as a Nepali citizen, you can also apply for international airlines, which has been on the rise since after COVID. So before COVID, there was a limited number of international airlines looking for cabin crew from Nepal. But recently, I don't know if you've seen them, but there has been a lot of vacancy openings for Nepali cabin crew as well. So, to become a cabin crew, to become a cabin crew as a Nepali, you don't have to limit yourself to applying for a job, in Nepal itself.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, it is tough. It is very, very tough, the competition, but you can still make it.
Yeah, I think that about 10 or 20 years ago, we were not quite sensitive to marginalized people. The airlines outside our country didn't really think that they could hire cabin crew outside their country itself. But now, if you take a look at the advertisements, they say that we encourage people from marginalized communities. They say that border will not really be an issue. If you're from Nepal, we'll hire you in India as well. And there are advertisements from Air Indigo, Air India, and you can see a lot of flight attendants who make it, as you say, to airlines that are not based in our country.
Yeah, definitely.
So, have you ever had the chance to go in an international flight, or you've been more or less limited to domestic flight as a cabin crew?
How do I answer this? Well, I won't lie and say that I haven't thought of joining international airlines, but given the opportunity that I have had the privilege of having in Nepal, I would like to pursue my career in Nepali aviation right now. Maybe if you'd asked me this question 2 to 3 years ago, I would have said, yes, I am going to apply for an international airlines. Yes, I will settle abroad. But now that, my priorities have changed, and so
You'd be happily serving Nepalese aviation.
Yeah.
You're somebody who works as a cabin crew manager, and this is, I assume, a 10 to 5 job. I mean, I don't want to make the assumptions already that you don't work before 10 or after 5. Maybe there's something like that. If the flights are operated very early in the morning or extremely late in the night. But how does a general 10 to 5 job for a cabin crew look like?
For a cabin crew or a cabin crew manager?
Oh, sorry, for a cabin crew manager. I'm sorry.
Okay. So cabin crew managers, it is like you said, a 10 to 5 job, but it's not just limited to our desks. We have to run to the airport to conduct checks as well of other junior cabin crew, and we have to see through everything from cabin crew's initial interview to their final interview, and then their initial trainings, recurrent trainings, all their uniforms and grooming and everything involved. Yeah.
Okay. There might be a lot of trainings that cabin crew are involved in that we don't really know about. Say, for example, again, talking about the lady who told us that she'd written a letter to her parents, thinking that that might be a last day. She told me that before taking a flight, she was asked questions as a cabin crew, and if the examiner thought that she couldn't answer well, she would have been taken off as cabin crew, and that there is a repeated interrogation of things so that people don't rest on their laurels, as it were. And so the cabin crew always has to learn a lot about the flights, has always got to keep himself or herself updated with things. Is that really true?
Yes, it is. Well, most jobs in the world require you to be updated. We're living in the age of information now, so it's very important. And we do have recurrent trainings that keep you updated, and it's not just restricted to learning during those trainings. I mean, as a cabin crew, I believe you can update yourself. You can easily access like aviation news, aviation journals, and things like that related to your job to become more updated and aware. Yeah.
So when you became a cabin crew, and I think 6 or 7 years ago, the information about this was not really out there. But now that we do have a bit of things to scratch upon when it comes to cabin crew, was there any particular role model that you had when you were a child aspiring to become someone like that? I mean, if you ask a lot of cabin crew these days who come around, and if you ask them, is there somebody you look up to? And the first thing they say is, I look up to Nirja Bano. There was a movie that was made out of her bravery, out of her death as well.
Yeah, she is a very potent figure for cabin crew around the globe. Yes.
Yeah. So were there anybody apart from Nirja Bano that you looked up to, or was it something that you wanted to become without really having the heroes and idols?
Well, I'm not going to say that I do have an inspiration, but they're not just limited to cabin crew. Honestly speaking, um, no one in my family is from the aviation background, so I'm the first to pursue a career in aviation here from my family. And it wasn't even like a childhood dream or anything like that. It wasn't like I wanted to become an air hostess since I was little. It wasn't anything like that. I actually pursued my studies in journalism, but I was encouraged actually by my own family to become an air hostess. Yeah.
Okay. Because you sometimes hear from a lot of people that sometimes it's the family who comes in the way. You say that we don't want you to become an air hostess, so it must have been a privilege to have family members who supported you throughout something that's still not a mainstream sort of pursuit in terms of career.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I definitely do feel very lucky to have a family that supports me in my career.
Yeah. We have had news now in the cabin crew sector that a lot of airlines now have had ways to change the uniforms of the people they generally wear. About a month or so ago, it was Akasa Air, which allowed cabin crew to wear sneakers around. About a week or two ago, we also had, I think it was the British Airways, which allowed the male cabin crew to wear makeup as well. Are changes in the uniforms like that there in our country as well? Or how is the uniform of a particular aircraft decided in our country?
Well, not really, because I think how we train our cabin crew in Asia is very different to how they do it in Europe. So in Europe, I think now the focus is mainly on comfort for the cabin crew. I mean, we do think about that here as well. But in Asia, we not just Nepal, mostly in Asia, I feel like we're still focused on um, we're still focused on our branding, our image, and since cabin crew are the first liners, not first liners, I would say brand ambassadors of the airlines. I think airlines still would want us to look more polished for the customers. Yeah. So in that sense, I think it would take
A bit of time.
it would take a whole another generation.
A generation.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the positives about the dresses that some of the cabin crew, some of the airlines have issued for the cabin crew is that they sometimes tend to reflect traditional Nepalese dresses as well. Say they're not your suit and tie sort of attires, but in some of the airlines you can see people representing
Yes.
the traditional dresses of certain communities, and I think that we have to praise them for that.
Oh yes, obviously we do. Yeah. Like I said, in Asia we care about our branding more. So your culture is a part of your brand. For example, in Nepal we have cabin crew uniforms that are bakus and saris.
Yeah, which is a bit different compared to what you generally think
It is.
cabin crew, because you tend to think of those as people who wear shirts and suits.
It does make us stand out. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So for about the 6 and 7 years of working as a cabin crew, there might have been a few hurdles that you faced along the way. Maybe sometimes you really thought, maybe this is not really the job that I want to pursue.
Oh
Because
yes,
there are moments of crisis that way.
there have been many hurdles that I've had to face, in my journey as a cabin crew. I believe that if you're, passionate about something, if you really want to pursue something, there are going to be, mishaps. There are going to be ups and downs, and it's your dedication that's going to, take you where you want to be in your journey. So yeah, I've had moments of doubt, especially during the pandemic, because it wasn't just me, but it was the whole world was, it was a very uncertain time for everyone. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when the recent crash of the ATR 72 took place, we also heard a lot of reports that there were a lot of cabin crew who'd resigned from their jobs. They thought that they might be up in line for another crash, and there was news. I mean, sometimes news is a part of disinformation. Sometimes it's misinformation. Sometimes it's uninformation as well. So, have you ever had? Have you ever seen a friend of yours who might have quit because of that particular crash, or how much truth is behind these things, or is it something that just comes about as a way of panic?
Well, I wouldn't say it was it's an instantaneous decision. Leaving a job, certainly you have to give a lot of thought to it. So yeah, I have had friends who have quit after the crash, but not just because of the crash. Speaking of, I would like to talk about the rate of turnover of cabin crew, especially in Nepal. So my friends, I can't speak for everyone who left, yes, but some of them left not because of the crash, but because of personal reasons as well. They felt like it was time to move on to a different career. They believed it was just time to go on with their lives, because being a cabin crew, it is a very demanding job. It requires you to be flexible. It requires you to be away from home most of the time. And this is one of the reasons for such a high turnover, I believe, as well. Because getting into the industry as a cabin crew, we're already somewhat trained. We're already somewhat, taught that this isn't a career to pursue for the long run. So many cabin crews that I've met, they've they happily admit that they're just doing this while they're young.
For X number of
yeah,
years, maybe.
yeah, while they're young, as long as they enjoy it. I mean, as you should. I mean, if a job stops giving you, that joy, you don't have reason to continue. But there is like a stigma around this job as well, because people don't take it as seriously as it needs to be taken.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was reading through a few terms that are used by air hostesses,
Oh, please tell me about it.
which are really bad.
Yeah.
One of the really funny ones, and somebody might think that this is bringing out the sexist in me, is that somebody wrote, "A cabin crew is nothing but a sandwich mechanic." Things like you hear things like these, and we don't really get to know what you guys do. We think of, I mean, it's the general feel of people that you're just there with some pretty looking places.
Yeah. There are lots of names.
Is, and there's a stereotype like that, and they don't really know that you guys are there primarily in order to ensure their safety, in order to calm the nerves of the people, and the nerves might jingle as they do when you're flying over turbulent pockets of spaces as well. The first female cabin crew was there just specifically for this reason. It is said that she was a trained nurse, and she told the airlines that if you have somebody like me, give the passengers the assurance that nothing will happen to them. And I think this part is often overlooked, and there's a very bad stereotype around
Definitely. This reminds me of when I first told a friend of mine that I wanted to, pursue my career as a cabin crew, that I wanted to apply for training for cabin crew. He told me, and I quote, orange juice dina pani kina training chahiyo ra भनेर. Yeah. So that hit me like a ton of bricks, because first off, I thought it was quite sexist of him to make that remark. And second of all, rather than discouraging me, it, motivated me to like pursue this career more, because I wanted to show not just him, but everyone that,
being more than just distributing orange juice.
This is more than just orange juice.
Yeah, I think this is a perspective that a lot of people lack. And I think it is because a lot of people have not been in situations which are very precarious. If they were in an airplane, and if things were, and if they were there in situations where things got really bad, then they'd know what important role the cabin crew had. Otherwise, if the flight is really normal, if there's no turbulence, if there's nothing to do, then we tend to think of cabin crew as pretty much disposable, in that they're not being needed for anything except serving food.
Yeah, but that's just a stereotype that you have.
That's a stereotype.
It's a part of the job.
It's a part.
It's a part of the job. Yeah.
So what are some of the most beautiful things? We've talked about the sexism issue. We've talked about the fact that the dresses might not be very comfortable as compared to Europe. We said that there are possibilities of dying, and some fear like that do come about as well. But what are some of the high points that you've experienced in your life as a cabin crew, or as a cabin crew manager?
As a cabin crew, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. I mean, ask any cabin crew, he or she will say, I love my job because I get to travel around the world, I get to meet new people, I get to like experience different cultures, learn new languages, learn new skill sets and things like that. So yeah, definitely. I mean, the aviation, it is a fulfilling career if, you stay here long enough, I believe. Yeah.
So how long are you planning to stay here then in the field of aviation?
I plan to stay here as long as I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So there might be a time where you want to move up the skill in terms of your job? Say you started as a cabin crew, now the manager. There might be aspiring positions that you look up to and think, well, that is the place that I strive to be someday.
Well, I haven't thought of a particular position, but I would like to see myself, bringing about certain change, especially for cabin crew. I would very much like to remove the stigma and stereotypes around the job of a cabin crew, because to be honest, cabin crew are very much discredited. And we have cabin crew from various different backgrounds, educational background, interests, and everything like that. But um, when people see us, even in the field itself, even in aviation itself, they just see the makeup, the uniform, and the smile. Yeah, and I would like to, expand our horizon more, and let people know that we're there for more than just looking pretty and welcoming passengers on board. We're there for your safety and security, and we know what we're doing. Yeah. So
One of the things that's really not done in our country, and a part of the blame or a part of this, I don't want to portion the blame to anybody, is that people are not really aware about aviation in general. For example, there is no aviation awareness campaign. There is a campaign about women's health. There's a campaign about dental health. There's a campaign about everything, but we don't really have a lot of campaigns related to aviation, where, for example, a layperson would get to know a bit more about it. Say, for example, in the United States of America, you have wonderful programs related to space science, where they teach you a few things to students in a school, students in college, and perhaps encourage them in order to get in this particular field. But I think that there's a dearth of this in our country. Normal people don't really know about the aviation sector as much. Best they know is Nepal is a dangerous country. Better not fly because you might die in a crash. I think that is the sort of knowledge that a lot of people have. And in your opinion, what are the things that we might do in order to make people more aware about aviation in general?
Well, it could be a lot of help if news outlets would, produce positive news about aviation as well, and not just highlight on the crashes or the incidents and the accidents. I mean, you know how it is in media, and people do like news of that sort. But if, I believe of course, we have to, as people in the aviation sector, we have to play our part as well. But, we also require assistance from other industries as well. And I believe media plays a huge role in this.
Yeah, I was talking to Pawana ma'am the other day, and I said we need a column in a newspaper which is dedicated to aviation as well. I mean, after the crash of the Yeti Airlines, they were thought of as devils, but many people don't really know that they were the first carbon neutral airlines of the country as well, which is a novel thing, which is a great achievement for a country as small as ours.
Yes, it is.
We're not really aware about climate change or global warming in general, but there is an airlines in our country, which I think also is the first airlines in South Asia itself to have carbon neutrality.
Oh, is it in South Asia?
I think that they achieved this feat in 2018-19. I'm not really sure about the date, but there was a report that was published by the United Nations itself, where it was written that Yeti Airlines is such a wonderful airline, and that they achieved something like this.
Yeah.
And people don't really know about this side at all. All they know is the ATR crashed. Before that, there was the Tara air crash, and these are devils. And I think YouTube thumbnails are also drawn in such a way that a lot of airlines are devils with big fangs that get into your muscle. And I think that's not necessarily true. no airline would really consciously think that I down this plane, because that hurts the business.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. In fact, like airlines go through so much and they spend so much money and time and effort in preventing these things. But, you know, this is just a series of unfortunate events. And you can't always predict when a plane is going to crash or when an emergency is going to occur. I mean, um, I don't know if I can say this, but plane crashes happen all around the world.
All around.
All around the world. But I don't see news outlets outside of Nepal who frame, their aviation sector as poorly as it is done in Nepal. Because, like you said, Yeti Airlines was the first carbon neutral airline in South Asia. I knew they were in Nepal, but I didn't know it was in South Asia. So news like this should be highlighted. I mean, it is important to report about incidents and accidents as well, but there is a fine line between, providing good news, authentic news, and just posting whatever for clickbait.
Yeah, and I think that this is also got to do not simply with the media, but the mentality in public in general as well. Because we don't really want to read a detailed piece about anything. We just want a bit of spice, a bit of something to spread as a rumor. We're not really accustomed to reading articles that are 10 or 15 minutes long and giving you perhaps both sides of the argument, the good as well as the bad. And if you take a look at how YouTube functions, it has come up with YouTube Shorts of its own. So you want bite in 30 seconds. And the only thing that you can do is write reports like these, hope that more people are lured in. So I think that the general public should also apportion a lot of this blame on itself, not simply on the media outlets. I mean, yes, media outlets are also adding fuel to the fire, coming up with rather stupid headlines sometimes. I had a person, I met him about 2 weeks ago. He told me a very stupid statement. He said, we built a podcast on Mount Everest. And so, what are you smoking or what? We had the podcast set up on Mount Everest as if it was something that you could do at the top of Everest itself. About a month or so ago, there was on an online newspaper which said that the world's grumpiest cat was found on Mount Everest. When you can't find anything on the top of Everest, you might find it in the Everest region. So Namche Bazaar also lies in the Everest region. Kumjung also lies in the Everest region. Dingboche, Tengboche, and the Everest Base Camp also fall in the remnants, but they're not Mount Everest on its own right. And when I talked to the person who set it up, he told me that he had set it up in a village that is known as Kunde, which is very close to Kumjung. And I said, that's not Mount Everest. That is Kumjung. There's a proper name for this. And so it is something that journalists tend to do in order to lure people into the headlines. But the people should also be critical of these news and say that I'm not going to watch news like this if you post it again. I'm going to unrecommend you from my YouTube feed, news feed. And I think that is a veritable problem that both sides have created, not simply the media, but also the people.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I'm sorry if I came off as, only blaming the media, but of course, as a consumer of media, if you're going to consume media at all, I mean, there are people who actively choose not to consume media at all. But if you choose to, go through news, if you choose to scroll through TikTok and Facebook and whatever social media platform or whatever news outlets, I do believe that you have to have a certain consciousness.
Yes.
And you have to at least have the ability to decide what's authentic and what's not.
So you should learn the argument from the opposite side as well. You can't really have your arguments on the table at all times and completely dismiss the other side of the equation. And I think that the data taking over online news platforms occurs in such a way that they tend to take off all of the information from the type of news that you're browsing, and they tend to bombard you with news that are very, very similar.
Oh, yeah.
And that, say you go on YouTube, for example, or Google, and you search about a particular celebrity, and next time around you have all of the recommendations showing all of the positive things about that particular celebrity, when we should when I think that shouldn't really be the case. People have the ability to decide what's good and bad, given that you show the good as well as the bad. So if you show the good side of the cabin crew along with the bad side of the cabin crew, people can then have an informed decision about it.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, as a journalism student myself, I know the importance of and how hard it is to find the balance to, give authentic news at the same time without being too clickbaity, and also, earn some kind of revenue from it, because it is a job after all. Yeah.
And so you studied journalism now. That's very fascinating. Where did you pursue your field of journalism?
So here in Kathmandu.
Here in Kathmandu.
I did.
And did you get to work in any news media outlets, or how did it really go?
So far no, because I would love to say that I have done some journalism work, but unfortunately I haven't had the chance to because of my career as a cabin crew. I didn't have a lot of time because I had to be flying all over Nepal. I had to go on layovers, and I didn't. But it's just I think it's just an excuse. I mean, if you want to do something, you can definitely do it. But it was also a matter of the pandemic that didn't really allow me to pursue anything. But this year, I've been planning to do something about it.
Well, you were gracious enough to write about hidden responsibilities of cabin crew for Aviation Nepal.
Yes.
And we'd like to thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And we hope that we get to learn more about aviation from you. And we have a section at Aviation Nepal News about community support. We want to post information related to aviation that a lot of people don't know about. And one of the things that we're currently doing is something that's known as This Day in Aviation, something important that happened in the field of aviation on this particular day in history. So today is something that is known as Yuri's Night. It was the day when Yuri Gagarin first made it to space.
Yeah.
And it's such a wonderful occasion for the aviation community in general, in that we transcended the boundaries of the skies that we see from the Earth, and we went to space as well. And we wanted to inform people that Yuri Gagarin thought that this was a momentous occasion. There were a lot of people who wanted the United States of America and the USSR to call the Cold War off, and they hoped that space might be the next frontier. And I hope that you could write more articles for us. I hope that when we become better in terms of conducting the podcast in the future, we hope that there are more events to talk about. It was wonderful to meet you, madam, today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I had a lovely time here.